Okay, so let's unpack this. Philosophy and slapstick comedy. Seems like a pretty bizarre pairing, right?
Totally. Until you mention the film Bananas, the 1971 Woody Allen flick.
Exactly. And suddenly that collision, it just makes this weird kind of sense.
Yeah, it really does. And it wasn't just Allen being funny for funny's sake. It felt like a real pivot,
The pivot towards what, though?
towards this wild, almost like anarchic style. But beneath it, there was this surprisingly sharp geopolitical satire bubbling up.
Right. It's fascinating how Bananas uses that almost relentless comedic energy.
Yeah, and channels it into looking at some really fundamental questions. Things like, how do we organize ourselves?
Yeah.
What are our ideas about a perfect society, utopia?
And power dynamics, too.
Power dynamics, absolutely. And that sort of optimistic drive, sometimes maybe a bit naive behind political change.
It's definitely a film that makes you laugh, no question.
Oh, for sure. But it's also like constantly nudging you, making you consider the absurdity just under the surface of everything.
Exactly. So you've shared some great insights on Bananas with me. And for this deep dive, we really want to get into the heart of that absurdity.
Yeah, dig into it.
We're not just going to chuckle at the banana jokes, although let's be honest,
There are plenty of those.
there are plenty. But our mission here is to pull out the most insightful stuff and, yeah, the most entertainingly thought-provoking bits of the film.
Okay.
And we're kind of zooming in on three core themes that really pulse through all that madness in San Marcos.
Right. And as we've seen from the sources you looked at, these themes aren't just random plot points Allen threw in.
No, they feel deliberate.
They really provide a framework for his commentary. It lets him move past just simple gags
Mm-hmm.
and offer a surprisingly thoughtful, okay, maybe comically thoughtful, take on some pretty enduring aspects of, being human and how we interact with the world.
All right, so let's plunge into our first theme, and it's one that feels, well, surprisingly grounded amidst all the revolutionary chaos.
Okay, what is it?
It's the driving force of love.
Ah, yes. Love.
The whole completely outlandish story of Bananas basically kicks off because our main guy, Fielding Mellish,
The classic neurotic New Yorker.
quintessential. He goes through this spectacularly humiliating experience trying to impress a South American revolutionary, Nancy.
Right.
And his reaction, not, therapy, but hopping on a plane to follow her to this fictional, very volatile country, San Marcos.
It's interesting, isn't it, how Allen uses that really personal, almost primal motivation, Mellish's crush on
Like
Nancy,
infatuation.
as the engine for this much bigger satirical story.
And the contrast between them is so stark.
Totally. You've got Mellish, who seems kind of adrift, just trying to figure out his own life.
Trying to make it as a, product tester?
Something like that, yeah. And then there's Nancy, this totally committed guerrilla leader fighting for this radical political vision.
It really makes you wonder about the strange ways our personal desires can just slam into these huge social movements.
Absolutely. And it's so illogical on his part, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
Mellish just tosses his entire, relatively predictable New York life out the window.
All for a girl.
All because he wants to win Nancy back. It really puts a spotlight on this idea that, well, when love's involved, logic often just, leaves the room.
Mm-hmm. There's this built-in element of risk,
Yeah.
right? Even a willingness to sacrifice comfort, security,
Everything familiar.
when you're chasing a genuine connection with someone.
And what's also pretty revealing is how Mellish, almost by accident it seems, goes through this kind of transformation.
Right, through this romantic quest.
Yeah. Despite having zero military aptitude. I mean, famously mistaking grenades for snacks.
Classic moment.
And giving these completely contradictory orders.
Yeah.
Somehow he just stumbles his way into a position of, well, something like respect.
It kind of suggests that maybe love, or perhaps just the sheer effort we put into it.
A persistence.
Yeah, the persistence can unexpectedly spark personal growth. A very unconventional way of learning, let's say.
Right. And Alan's comedic view is so key here. Nancy eventually accepts Mellish, but it's not because he suddenly turns into Che Guevara.
Definitely not.
It's his sheer, almost ridiculous persistence, his, endearing naivete.
Yeah, it's like Alan is saying, maybe true connection values those very human, imperfect qualities more than some idealized version of, competence or revolutionary zeal.
Which actually sets us up really nicely for our second core theme.
Okay, let's hear it.
the multifaceted idea of freedom. Bananas explores this on, like, 2 levels.
Right, there's the big picture.
Sweeping political level, yeah. The revolution in San Marcos.
And then there's the personal.
And the much more intimate personal level with Fielding's own journey towards, well, some kind of freedom.
So politically, you've got the guerrillas in San Marcos trying to overthrow this dictator who's almost a caricature.
Totally. But Alan's picture of the revolution itself is just dripping with satire.
Oh, absolutely. It's this wonderfully chaotic, bureaucratic mess.
Complete with self-help manuals for revolutionaries.
Yeah. And catchy, but ultimately kind of empty slogans like Libertad con, that's stilo, freedom with style.
And those ridiculous uniform changes. It just perfectly skewers the superficiality that can creep into even the most serious regime changes.
What's fascinating is how Alan just avoids any kind of romanticized view of the revolutionary struggle.
No heroic poses here.
No, he really highlights the inherent absurdity and often the self-serving power dynamics that can pop up even in movements supposedly aimed at liberation. The focus isn't on these, lofty ideals in a vacuum. It's on the messy, often farcical reality of trying to pull off large-scale political change.
It really makes you think about how easily good intentions can just get swallowed up in the execution.
Definitely. And then, like you said, there's Fielding's personal side of freedom.
Right, by stepping way outside his very routine life in New York.
His comfort zone.
Massively outside. And getting swept up in this totally bonkers revolution, he starts to kind of stumble onto his own sense of agency.
Yeah, he starts off so passive, right? Almost clueless.
Totally motivated just by chasing Nancy.
But by the end, he's making his own choices. He's acting out of a kind of conviction that seems to go beyond just, winning her over.
And it feels like Alan might be hinting that this personal freedom, this real emancipation, it comes from a weird place.
Where's that?
From overcoming that deep-seated fear of judgment and just accepting that, a certain amount of chaos is just part of being human.
So it's about finding your own ability to act authentically, even when life is predictably messy and unpredictable.
Exactly. Which leads us perfectly into our third theme, this often absurd human search for meaning.
Ah, the big question.
What big is, when you boil it all down, what's the point of it all, right? And Bananas, in its own incredibly strange way, seems to offer an answer. Maybe. Maybe there isn't some grand pre-written purpose.
Okay, so what then?
Maybe meaning is something we actively create through the causes, however big or small, that we decide to embrace.
That's a really interesting point. And you see Fielding's own idea of purpose shift during the film.
Definitely. At first, he seems to be looking for external validation, right? Through his weird product testing performances or his relationships.
Yeah. Then he gets tangled up in this armed conflict.
And ultimately,
he seems to find a kind of acceptance, a kind of meaning maybe in just being himself. Flaws, foibles, and all.
it feels like a very human journey. Very relatable, despite the setting.
It is. It's almost like the film is saying the meaning isn't necessarily in reaching some final goal.
Right, not the destination.
But it's in the experiences, the connections, the totally absurd moments along the way.
Like those bizarre philosophical chats in the middle of the jungle.
Exactly. Or the completely baffling misunderstandings with the local journalist trying to interview him.
Those clandestine late-night conspiracy talks.
It's all in the journey itself. Bumps, banana peels, everything included.
Absolutely. And the film does this brilliant thing, juxtaposing moments of pure slapstick like bombs disguised as kids' toys.
Ridiculous.
With these surprisingly thoughtful, almost introspective conversations.
It's such a powerful reminder that laughter, love, those huge existential questions, they aren't separate things.
No, they can all exist together, even in total chaos.
So what's Alan ultimately suggesting about how we find meaning then?
It feels like he's hinting that the most, maybe the only authentic way is to keep questioning.
Never stop searching.
Never stop searching. And maybe, most importantly, keep a sense of humor about the whole baffling process.
Yeah, that seems key. And the film is just loaded with these little nuggets of dialogue that really capture these themes.
Oh yeah, those quotes are great, like Fielding's seemingly throwaway line. Si quieres cambiar el mundo, primero cambia tu forma de atarte los zapatos.
If you want to change the world, first change how you tie your shoes.
It's such a beautifully understated way of saying that big change often starts small, right? With individual actions, self-awareness.
Those little personal acts of intention. Or how about Nancy's direct challenge to him?
Which one?
La revolución no admite gente indecisa. Tú que eres melish, revolucionario o turista.
The revolution doesn't allow for indecisive people. What are you, Mellish? revolutionary or tourist. Oof.
Right, it just throws his kind of flimsy motivations into sharp focus. It highlights that pressure to commit, to pick a side, especially when social change is happening.
Yeah. And then there's the Comandante's very blunt take on their strategy.
Oh, this one's great.
Aquí, la planificación estratégica consiste en tirar dardos a un mapa.
Here, strategic planning consists of throwing darts at a map. It's just a perfect illustration of that chaotic, sometimes nonsensical reality behind even serious political efforts.
Makes you question how much control anyone really has.
Exactly. Then you get Fielding's final sort of internal thought.
You, the end, yeah.
Pensé que la libertad era derrocar un dictador. Ahora sé que es aprender a reírse de uno mismo.
I thought freedom was overthrowing a dictator. Now I know it's learning to laugh at yourself. That's such a crucial moment.
It really marks his shift, doesn't it, from seeing freedom as this external political thing.
To something much deeper, more internal, more resilient. Self-acceptance.
And we can't forget that local journalist asking the tough question.
Oh, the deadpan delivery. General Mellish, ¿qué opina de la democracia? General Mellish, what's your opinion of democracy?
And Mellish's immediate, completely self-absorbed answer, Democracia. Yo solo vengo a buscar a mi novia. Democracy. I'm just here looking for my girlfriend.
It just brilliantly shows how often our personal motivations, even something as simple as romance,
Can totally overshadow the grand political ideals, at least for the individuals caught up in the middle of it all.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what are the main things we should really take away from Bananas?
Well, it really hits me how Alan uses that relentless absurdity. It's not just for laughs.
No, it's a tool.
It's a surprisingly effective tool, actually, for both sharp political critique and, maybe more surprisingly, for pretty profound self-discovery.
Exactly. Fielding Mellish's incredibly unlikely journey is such a potent reminder that, well, love can lead us down the most unexpected roads.
And that freedom isn't just some abstract political idea out there. It's also this ongoing dynamic thing, the ability to constantly reevaluate ourselves, challenge our own limits, maybe even reinvent who we are.
And I think the film's satire really hits home when you think about our own very human tendency to sometimes idealize things.
Idealize causes, leaders.
Yeah, often without really digging beneath the surface or, critically looking at the practical side of things.
Those ridiculous revolutionary slogans and that almost cartoonish coup.
Yeah.
They really hold up a mirror to that tendency in us.
Definitely. But ultimately, Bananas does offer a surprisingly hopeful message, I think, about the potential of the individual.
Yeah, Mellish, this seemingly very ordinary, even kind of bumbling guy.
Totally bumbling.
He ultimately shows that real impact, even a kind of personal revolution, can come from daring to question the status quo.
Embracing change.
Embracing the inevitability of change, yeah. And crucially, learning from the mistakes you're definitely going to make along the way.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Why do we so often cling to established structures, to conventional ways of thinking, even when they don't really make total sense anymore?
Good question.
And could you argue that laughter, in its own unique way, is maybe the ultimate act of questioning, a kind of playful rebellion against rigid, unquestioned power?
Because what Alan seems to be playfully suggesting with Bananas is that when we really get by, that freedom is an internal state.
Yeah.
That capacity to think critically for ourselves and maybe not take ourselves quite so seriously all the time, then suddenly this huge range of possibilities just opens up.
Whether that means facing down a ludicrous dictator
Or just taking one small step outside our own well-worn comfort zones.
It really highlights the profoundly human and often very, very funny nature of even the most politically charged comedy.
Absolutely. Bananas really nails that.